He wouldn't even take them off at night and was confident of his strength, but they ambushed him when he lay down for a brief nap on the rostrum in the mess hall. The gang swooped swiftly to the assault and fled just as swiftly, and he was without his boots. All the laces had been cut and the boots jerked off. Look for them, but where? The boots would have been sent outside the compound immediately through one of the jailers, and there sold for a high price. And what didn't the kids float out on the compound to be sold? Each time the camp chiefs, taking pity on their youth, issued them even slightly better footgear or duds, or some flattened out pads for mattresses that had been taken away from the 58s. In several days it would all have been traded to the free employees for Makorka, and the kids would once more be going around in tatters and sleeping on bare boards. It was enough for a careless, free worker to go into the camp compound with the dog and turn his head for 1 second, and he couldn't buy his dog's pelt. That very same evening outside the camp compound, the dog would have been coaxed away, knifed, skinned, cooked, all in a trice. There is nothing finer than thievery and brigandage. They provide nourishment, they are jolly, but young bodies also need simple exercise, innocent enjoyment and relaxation. If they were given hammers to nail shell boxes together, they would brandish them about incessantly, and with huge enjoyment, even the girls, hammer nails into anything that came to hand. Tables, walls, tree stumps. They used to be constantly fighting with each other, not just to knock over a bread box, but really fighting. They would pursue each other over the bunks and into the aisles. And it didn't matter that they were stepping on legs, on belongings, spilling things, soiling things, waking people up, hurting others. They were playing. All children play like that. But for all ordinary children, there are nonetheless parents in our epoch, unfortunately, no more than nonetheless. And there is some controlling force over them, and they can't be stopped. They can't be reached, punished, sent away. But in camp, all that was impossible. To get through to the kids with words was simply impossible. Human speech was not for them. Their ears simply did not admit anything that they themselves didn't need. If irritated old men started to grab them and pull them up short, the kids would hurl heavy objects at them. The kids found amusement in just about anything. They would grab the field shirt off an elderly invalid and play keep away, forcing him to run back and forth just as if he were their own age. Does he become angry and leave? Then he will never see it again. They will have sold it outside on the compound for a smoke, and they will even come up to him innocently afterward. Papasha, give us a light. Oh, come on now, don't be angry. Why did you leave? Why didn't you stay and catch it? For adults, grandfathers and grandfathers, these boisterous games of the kids in the crowded conditions of camp could cause more anguish and be more hurtful than their robbing and their rapacious greed. It proved to be one of the most sensitive forms of humiliation for an elderly person to be made equal with a young whippersnapper. If only it were equal, but not to be turned over to the tyranny of the whippersnappers. The kids' actions were unpremeditated, and they didn't mean to cause hurt or offense. They weren't pretending. They simply did not consider anyone a human being except themselves and the older thieves. That is how they came to perceive the world, and now they clung to that view. At the end of work, they would break into a column of adult sex who were utterly fagged out, hardly able to stand, sunk in a trance or reverie. The kids would jostle the column, not because they had to be first. This meant nothing, but just for the fun of it. They used to talk noisily, constantly taking the name of Pushkin in vain. Pushkin, took it, Pushkinated. He used to direct obscene curses at God, Christ, and the Holy Virgin, and they would shout out all sorts of obscenity about sexual deviations and perversions, not even shamed by the presence of elderly women standing there, let alone the younger ones. During their short camp stay, they attained the peak, the summit of freedom from society. During the periods of long roll calls in the camp compound, the kids used to chase each other around, torpedoing the crowd, knocking people into one another. Well, peasant, why were you in the way? Or they would run around a person, one after the other, as they might around a tree. And the person was even more useful than a tree, because you could shield yourself with him, jerk him, make him totter, tug him in different directions. This would have been hurtful even when you were feeling cheerful, but when your whole life is broken, when a man had been cast into the distant pit of a camp to die, when death from hunger already hung over you, your vision was darkening, it was impossible to rise above yourself and have sympathy for the youngsters, and the fact that they could play such a carefree games in so dismal a place. No, the tormented elderly people were possessed with rage, and they used to shout at them, "Plague, you little skunks! Plague on you, little skunks, scum, mad dogs, drop dead. I could strangle them with my own hands. Worse rats than the fascists. They've sent them to kill us." And there was so much hatred in those shouts of the elderly invalids that if words could kill, they would have. Yes, and it really seemed that the kids had been set on them intentionally, because after prolonged thought, the camp chiefs could never have invented a more cruel whip, just as in a successful chess game, all the combinations suddenly begin to mesh of themselves, and it seems as if they had been brilliantly thought out beforehand. So too a great deal succeeded in our system, to the end of wearing people down more effectively. And it seemed that the evil little imps of Christian myth must have been just the same as these, and in no wise different. All the more so since their chief amusement, their constant symbol, their sign of greeting, and their threat was the slingshot, the index and the middle finger of the hand parted in a V sign, like agile budding horns, but they were not for budding, they were for gouging, because they were aimed always at the eyes, and this had been borrowed from the adult thieves, and indicated a seriously mean threat. "I'll gouge out your eyes, you shit." And among the kids too, this was their favorite game. All of a sudden the snake's head, a slingshot, rises out of nowhere in front of an old man's eyes, and the fingers move steadily towards the eyes. They are going to pull them out. The old man recoils. He is pushed in the chest just a bit, and the other kid has already knelt on the ground right behind his legs, and the old man falls backward, his head banging on the ground, accompanied by the gay laughter of the kids, and no one will ever help him up. And the kids don't even realize they have done anything bad. It was merely fun. And you'd not catch those devils either. No way. And the old man, rising with difficulty, would whisper with rage, "Only I had a machine gun, I'd shoot them without pity." Old man T nourished burning hatred for them. He used to say, "Nothing good can come of them anyway. For human beings they are a plague. We have to annihilate them on the fly." And he worked out a means to this end. Whenever he succeeded in creeping up on a kid on the sly, he would hurl him to the ground and press down on the boy's chest with his knees until he could hear the ribs crack, but he didn't break them. He would let the kid up at that point. T used to say that the kid wouldn't survive, and that there wasn't a physician who could diagnose what was wrong with him. And by this means T sent several kids to the next world before they themselves beat him to death. Hate begets hate. The black water of hate flows easily and quickly along the horizontal. That was easier than for it to erupt upward through a crater against those who condemned both the old and young to a slave's fate. This is how small, stubborn fascists were trained by the joint action of Stalinist legislation, a GULag education, and 11 of the thieves. It was impossible to invent a better method of brutalizing children. It was quite impossible to find a quicker, stronger way of implanting all the vices of camp in tiny, immature hearts. Even when it would have cost nothing to soften the heart of a child, the camp bosses didn't permit it. This was not the goal of their training. At Krivosheikhovo, Camp Number 1, a boy asked to be transferred so that he could be with his father in Camp Number 2. This was not permitted. After all, the rules required families to be broken up, and the boy had to hide in a barrel to get from one camp to the other and live there with his father in secret. And in their confusion, they assumed he had escaped and used a stick with spikes made of nails to poke about in the latrine pits to see whether or not he had drowned there. But it is only the beginning that is hard for Volodya Negaryov. At 15, it was somehow strange to be imprisoned, but later in the course of 6 terms, he managed to collect nearly a century, including 25 years to each terms. He spent hundreds of days in punishment locks and prisons. There, his young lungs acquired TB, and for 7 years, he was on the all-union wanted list. And for this, he was well set, of course, on the true thief's path. Today, he is a Group 2 invalid, without 1 lung and 5 ribs. Vitya Kopyatev has been imprisoned continually since the age of 12. He has been sentenced 14 times, 9 of them for escaping. I've never yet lived in freedom legitimately. Yura Yermolov got work after his release, but was fired because it was more important to give the job to a demobilized soldier, and he was forced to go on tour with the end result, a new prison term. Stalin's immortal laws on kids existed for 20 years, until the decree of April 24, 1954, which relaxed them slightly, releasing those kids who had served more than 1/3 of their first term. And what if there were 14? 20 years, 20 harvests, and 20 different age groups had been maimed with crime and depravity. So, who dares cast a shadow on the memory of our great Corypheus? There were nimble children who managed to catch Article 58 very early in life. For example, Kelly Pavlov got it at 12 from 1943 to 49. He was imprisoned in the colony of Zakhovsk for Article 58. In fact, no minimum age existed. That is what they said, even in public lectures on jurisprudence. As, for example, in Telinin in 1945. During USMA, Dr. Usma knew a 6-year-old boy imprisoned in a colony under 58, but that evidently is a record. Sometimes the arrest of the child was put off for the sake of appearances, but took place later anyway. For example, Vera Inchik, the daughter of a charwoman, and 2 other girls, all aged 14, discovered in Yeisk in 1932 that in the course of the liquidation of the kulaks, little children were being thrown out to die. The girls, like the revolutionaries earlier, decided to protest. They wrote out their protests in their own handwriting on sheets of paper taken from their school notebooks and posted them in the marketplace themselves, expecting immediate and universal indignation. A doctor's daughter, it would appear, was arrested immediately, but the daughter of the charwoman was only noted on the list. When 1937 came, she too was arrested for spying on behalf of Poland. And where, if not in this chapter, are we going to mention the children orphaned by the arrest of their parents? The children of the women of the religious commune near Kosta were fortunate. When their mothers were sent off to Solovki in 1929, the children were soft-heartedly left in their own homes and on their own farms. The children looked after the orchards and vegetable gardens themselves, milked their goats, assiduously studied at school, and sent their school grades to their parents in Solovki, together with assurances that they were prepared to suffer for God as their mothers had. And of course, the party soon gave them this opportunity. Considering the instructions to disunite exiled children and their parents, how many of these kids must there have been back in the 20s? Remember that 48%. And who will ever tell us of their fate? Here is Galia Benedikova. Her father was a Petrograd typesetter, an anarchist, and her mother was a seamstress from Poland. Galia remembers very well her 6th birthday in 1933. They celebrated it joyfully. The next morning she woke up. Her father and mother were gone, and some stranger in uniform was messing about among their books. True, a month later her mother returned to her. The women and children were to travel to Tobolsk on their own as free people, only the men went on to prisoner transport. They lived there as a family, but they had not managed to complete the 3-year term before her mother was arrested again and her father was shot. Her mother died in prison a month later. Galia was taken to an orphanage in a monastery near Tobolsk. Conditions were such that the young girls lived in constant fear of violence. Then she was transferred to an orphanage in the city. The director talked to her like this: "You are the children of the enemies of the people, and nonetheless you are being clothed and fed." No, how humane of this dictatorship of the proletariat is. How humane it is. Galia became like a wolf cub. At the age of 11, she was already given her first political interrogation. Subsequently, she got a 10-ruble bill, although she did not serve it out in full. At the age of 40, she lives a lonely life now in the Arctic and writes, quote, "My life came to an end with my father's arrest. I love him so much to this very day, that I'm afraid to even think about it. That was a whole different world, and my heart is sick with love for him," unquote. And Svetlana Sedova also remembers, "I can never forget the day they took all our things out into the street and sat me there on top of them. And a heavy rain was falling. From the age of 6, I have been the daughter of a traitor to the motherland, and there can be nothing more awful in life than this. They were taken into NKVD foster homes, into special homes. The majority had their surnames changed, particularly those who had a famous name. Averbakh learned his real name only in 1956, but the Chebotarev name was not, as it seems, particularly famous. The children grew up totally purged of their parents' disgrace. Rosa Kovacs, a native of Philadelphia, brought here as a small child by her communist father, after leaving an NKVD foster home, found herself during the war in the American zone in Germany. What fates befall people, and what happened? She returned to the Soviet motherland and got her first 25 years. Even a superficial glance reveals one characteristic. The children, too, were destined for imprisonment. They, too, in their turn, would be sent off to the promised land of the archipelago, sometimes even at the same time as their parents. Take the 8th grader Nina Paragood. In November 1941, they came to arrest her father. There was a search. Suddenly Nina remembered that inside the stove lay a crumpled but not yet burned humorous rhyme, and it might have just stayed there, but out of nervousness, Nina decided to tear it up at once. She reached into the firebox, and the dozing policeman grabbed her. And this horrible sacrilege in a schoolgirl's handwriting was revealed to the eyes of the Czechists. Quote, "The stars in heaven are shining down, and their light falls on the dew. Smolensk is already lost and gone, and we're going to lose Moscow too." Unquote. And she expressed the desire, quote, "We only wish they'd bomb the school. We're awfully tired of studies." Unquote. Naturally, these full-grown men engaged in saving their motherland. Deep in the rear in Tambov, these knights, with hot hearts and clean hands, had to scotch such a mortal danger. Nina was arrested. Confiscated for her interrogation were her diary from the 6th grade and a counter-revolutionary photograph, a snapshot of the destroyed Favorinskaya school. Sorry, church. "What did your father talk about?" cried the knights with a hot heart. Nina only sobbed. They sentenced her to 5 years of imprisonment and 3 years deprivation of civil rights, even though she couldn't lose them since she didn't yet have them. In camp, of course, she was separated from her father. The branch of a white lilac tree tormented her. Her girlfriends were taking their examinations. Nina suffered the way a real criminal was supposed to suffer when being reformed. Quote, "What did my classmate Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya do, and how foul a thing am I?" Unquote. The security officers pushed down hard on that pedal. Quote, "But you can still catch up with her, just help us. Oh, you corrupters of young souls, how prosperously you are living out your lives. You are going to have to stand up somewhere, blushing and tongue-tied, and confess to what slops you poured over souls." But Zoya Lishcheva managed to outdo her whole family, and here's how her father, her mother, her grandfather, her grandmother, and her elder adolescent brothers had all been scattered to distant camps because of their faith in God. But Zoya was mere 10 years old. They took her to an orphanage in Averbakh province, and there she declared she would never remove the cross from around her neck, the cross which her mother had hung there when she said farewell. And she tied a knot of cords so tighter so they would not be able to remove it when she was asleep. The struggle went on and on for a long time. Zoya became enraged. "You can strangle me and take it off my corpse." And then she was sent to an orphanage for retarded children because she would not submit to their training. And in the orphanage were the dregs, a category of kids worse than anything described in this chapter. The struggle for the cross went on and on. Zoya stood her ground. Even here she refused to learn, to steal, or to curse. Quote, "A mother as sacred as mine would never have a daughter who is a criminal. I would rather be a political, like my whole family." Unquote. And she became a political. And the more her instructors and the radio praised Stalin, the more she clearly saw in him the culprit responsible for all their misfortunes. Excuse me, I'm tired. And refusing to give it to the criminals, she now began to win them over to her view. In the courtyard stood one of those mass-produced plaster statues of Stalin, and mocking an indecent graffiti began to appear on it. Kids love sport. The most important thing is to point them in the right direction. The administration kept repainting the statue, kept a watch over it, and reported the situation to the MGB. And the graffiti kept on appearing, and the kids kept on laughing. Finally, one morning, they found that the statue's head had been knocked off and turned upside down, and inside it were feces. Oh, sorry. This was a terrorist act. The MGB came and began, in accordance with all their rules, the interrogation and threats. Turn over the gang of terrorists to us, otherwise we are going to shoot the lot of you for terrorism. And there would have been nothing remarkable if they had. So what, 150 children shot. If he himself had known about it, he himself would have given the order. It is not known whether the kids would have stood up to them or given in, but Zoya Lasheva declared, "I did it all myself. What else is the head of that papa good for?" And she was tried, and she was sentenced to the supreme measure. No joke. But because of the intolerable humanitarianism of the 1950 law on the restoration of capital punishment, the execution of a 14-year-old was forbidden. And there they gave her a tenor. It's surprising it wasn't 25. Up to the age of 18, she was in ordinary camps, and from the age of 18 on, she was in special camps. For her directness and her laughter, she got a second camp sentence, and, it seems, a third one as well. Zoya's parents had already been freed, and her brothers too, but Zoya languished on in camp. Long live our tolerance of religion. Long live our children, the masters of communism. And let any country speak up that can say it has loved its children as we have ours. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.